Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. I'm Nick.
I'm Ian.
Today we're talking about albums that are bad. I guess not really bad to us, but bad. A lot of people think they're bad, but albums that we absolutely love. There's a bunch of links down below. Make sure you check them out. There's links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, for the merch page, for the Spotify and Apple Music playlist that we put together every week, and the Patreon page. Make sure you go check all that out. Of course, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give us the old thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. Make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time we release new episodes. So originally when I was putting together the idea for this topic, I was really kind of looking at almost like guilty pleasure kind of albums, but these aren't really guilty pleasure albums. At least I don't consider them that way. I just think they're good albums that for some reason a lot of people hate out there. I picked a couple that this guy absolutely hates also. So
well, yeah. Probably not for the same reasons that other people might hate them, but
probably,
and there might be some connection. I don't know.
But the first one I've got is an album that I think is largely gets overlooked, maybe because how strong this band's catalog was in the '70s, maybe.
And this was a shift. It was
definitely musically a shift for the band. But it's Technical Ecstasy by Black Sabbath. This is an album where punk was really getting popular. It was '76 when they released this. So music was changing. Popular music, and especially rock music, that time in the 70s was changing, and Black Sabbath was just trying to find where they fit in the musical landscape. Right. Is this their best album? No, but it is a really, really good album.
I totally agree. It's definitely an overlooked album in their catalog.
I will say before we started recording this, we were talking about the artwork on this.
I don't like that.
We both agree that the artwork does not, I think, reflect what Black Sabbath did at that musically in the 70s. And
I don't even think it reflects the title, because there's nothing really technical about what is being portrayed here, in my opinion. So I mean, it just doesn't work. I think this album cover on another album by another band would have been fine. But
I always thought it reminded me of an Alan Parsons album.
Yeah, it's got iRobot feel to it.
Yeah.
So for the first one that I have, it's an album that just did not sell well. I mean, I don't really know what the reviews were on this, but it did not sell. And the fact that the record label had signed this artist to 4 or 5 albums is kind of silly because they kind of got stuck with her. It worked out, obviously, but it's Why Can't Tori Read by Tori Amos. Technically, it's not a Tori Amos album. It was a band unit called Why Can't Tori Read because Tori was her nickname that everyone had for her. She wrote all the music. She wrote all the songs. And it's very much, if you listen to it, it's very much Tori's music. But it is slightly dated. It's 1987, I believe. And it took her 5 years. Yeah. Took 5 years for her to come up with her solo album, which she was contractually obligated to give Atlantic Records a solo album. Or an album. And
I said that looks very 1988.
It is. It is very 80s. So she did a music video. It is the most 80s music video I've ever seen. You know, I mean, even some of the Whitesnake videos are less 80s than her. The Big Picture is the name of the song. So look it up. It's on YouTube. But it's funny how much of Tori is in this album. It's not that far detached from what her music is, but it is a band effort. And I got overlooked. This is a re-release they did for Record Store Day back in, I think, 2017, maybe?
I didn't see the other date on here. That's what I was looking at. 2017.
Yeah, 2017. So people might be coming around to it, but it was pretty much out of print until then. So
the funny thing is about this album was, with as popular as her first couple of albums were, this one never really kind of caught on. Even when people were going back and rediscovering her music, it still didn't get the kind of, I think, the same kind of respect that some of her other albums did.
It didn't.
The next album is an album that a lot of people out there hate, including this guy right here. And, I get it. He could be kind of a polarizing musician. But this is it's an interesting album. It's definitely an album that is it's a transition period in his career. From, he was a young kid when he recorded stuff previous to before this album. And then, this is definitely the first one where he's had a little more mature themes and things like that. And musically, I think it's a fantastic album. But it's purposed by Justin Bieber. I know what you guys are thinking out there. Justin Bieber, he's an idiot. He's done a bunch of stupid things in his life, which, I think...
Well, by that standard, there's a lot of musicians we wouldn't like.
Well, I would say that if I had his kind of money when I was like 15, 16 years old and cameras were following me around, a lot of us were probably doing a lot of the same things, but I get it. A lot of other musicians, Kid Rock, a lot of other guys have done a lot of stupid things in their career. But going back and actually just listening to this album, this is a really good album. Like I said before, it's a transition to much more mature themes. Musically, he does a great job on here. Lyrics are fantastic. I think there's some darker themes in here. I think a lot more like looking back on some of the stupid stuff he'd done over his life leading up to that point. But overall, it is a really good album. I don't think it's anything that's gonna like blow your mind, but it's a lot better than what people think it is.
My next one is, obviously, it's an artist I've talked about a lot. And it's Special Forces by Alice Cooper.
No, you talk about Alice Cooper a lot?
It's been known to happen.
A couple times.
Now, it's either the first or the second album in his I don't remember doing that
his
era.
Blackout period.
His Blackout period, or I call it the cocaine albums. It depends on how you look at it, because Flush the Fashion is probably the first one, but this came after it, and this was definitely a cocaine-fueled album. But I love it, and it obviously didn't sell. Alice Cooper wasn't selling anything back then. I mean, in fact, he toured for this album and didn't tour again, and this was 1981, didn't tour again until 1986.
Yeah. Which I think that there was a live album for that. I don't remember what year.
82. It was like
82.
early 82.
The live album that came out for Record Store Day is actually a really good live album.
Yeah, I've only listened to it.
Which I'm surprised because I'm not a fan of this album.
Yeah, no, I like the songs on this album. There's some interesting things going on here. Yeah. It's got a little bit of new wave, a little bit of punk to it.
It's definitely a very early 80s album.
Yes, it's definitely dated, but I mean, a lot of music back then was. And it was different for Alice Cooper, even in the sense that it was, the people around him. Were still helping writing the music, or the songs anyway.
Yeah.
But the people around him were trying to get him to be more relevant. And for whatever reason, this album I think works a little bit, but it just didn't work for the general public.
Yeah.
But this is the song first time I played this for you on CD, I played the song "You Look Good in Rags," and I don't know why, but you cracked up at that song.
Who knows?
But
that was a long time ago.
It was a long time. This was like we were definitely in our teens.
There might have been some substances involved
on your part, not on mine. I was because it was at my house. There's no way I would have been on anything at my house. But yeah, this, like I said, Alice Cooper, Special Forces. I like the album. It's got some good songs on it.
Another one of those bands that gets a lot of hate out there. Another album that this guy hates also. And to be honest, I was never a big fan of this band. For the longest time, they were I kind of lumped them together with like Nickelback and other bands like that I really didn't like.
I think Nickelback is a huge band by comparison to these guys.
Speaking of Nickelback real quick, I did want to say my wife wants to go see Nickelback, and I was like, nah, I'm good on that concert. But anyway, the album is My Own Prison by Creed. Like I said, a lot of people out there hate Creed. I think they're a band that kind of gets a bad rap. I know Scott Stapp is not the greatest person on earth. The band itself moved on, has done some great stuff. I forgot I'm drawing a blank on what the name of the band was.
Alter Bridge?
Yeah, Alter Bridge. Yeah, Alter Bridge. They've done a bunch of great stuff as Alter Bridge without Scott Stapp. But I would say, like, as far as Creed albums go, I really like this first album. I wasn't a big fan of Human Clay that came out after that. It kind of seemed, I think they had that Three Doors Down effect where they tried to kind of recreate some of the stuff that they did on their first album. It didn't quite work as well on the second album. But as far as the album goes, I think it is a really great album. Some really good tracks on here. And one that I do go back to pretty often.
So the last one I have, this is an album that's not just polarizing to the general music audience, it's polarizing within the fan group.
It's polarizing within the Vinyl Den.
Yes.
Because I'm not a fan of this album.
Right. So yeah, this is, I guess, the equivalent of what he's done doing. But it's Under Wraps by Jethro Tull. This was their attempt to kind of do, I don't know if they were really trying to do a new wave type of thing, but they went pretty heavy electronic on this.
Yeah.
Using electronic drums, heavy synthesizers. which for the original fan base that had been with them from the 60s, they weren't buying this. And this was not new wave enough or modern enough
to draw in
the new crowd. So it was just nobody likes this album. There is a small percentage of the fan base that is coming around to it. I've always liked this album. This is probably the first album that I remember like fully listening to as a kid, because my dad had it and he was always playing it when it first came out because it was new. But even he's not a big fan of this album now. I like it. I think it's the last element of experimentation that Jethro Tull has done.
That's true. That's definitely true.
After this, it was just, they kind of went back to basics with rock, flute, and, standard kind of stuff. They've done some progressive things, but mostly just kind of the standard thing. This was their last attempt at being experimental and trying something new. And it probably is the last one because people didn't like it, know.
I will give them credit for at least trying to do something differently on this album, but I've always been a bigger fan of the early period Jethro Tull from like 68 through 79. And I think after that, maybe it's because they weren't really trying anything different after.
Yeah, and I would say that since from 79 to 84 when this came out, they released 2 albums, and Ian Anderson released a solo album, which is even more electronic than this. Yeah. The 2 albums that Jethro Tull released from 79 to 84 were not that experimental. Maybe a little, but Broadsword and the Beast was not.
Yeah.
It is very straightforward, just a regular rock album. So it was nice, in my opinion, looking back. I have, hindsight as a marker there. It's nice that they, said, okay, we've done the basic thing. Let's do something different. Yeah. Let's try. And to be fair, I think if this album had been made using real drums and maybe toned down the synthesizers just a little bit, I think this actually would have been probably one of their most popular albums because the songs on this album are fantastic.
And then the last one I've got is the most recent of any of the albums we have. This one came out in 2018. And to be honest, I don't think it's necessarily an album that gets a lot of hate. I think it's just generally overlooked because it was really kind of before this resurgence of punk music that we've seen over the last couple of years. But the album is Generation RX by Good Charlotte. This is an album that I think is very reminiscent of their first couple of albums, which were huge albums when they first came out. And then musically they kind of changed up and did a little more kind of poppier kind of stuff during the middle part of their career. And with this album, they went back to just kind of the same thing with Under Wraps. It's more after that they went to a more basic sound. Right. This was definitely a return to that more basic punk rock sound that Good Charlotte did earlier in their career. Like I said, it's not something that people hate, but it's just like overlooked. And if you're a punk fan, I definitely highly recommend listening to this album. I think it's some of the best work that Good Charlotte has done.
And I would agree because I said right before we were recording, I was like, I don't know if I've ever listened to that album. And when you said when it came out, I was like, oh yeah, I remember when it came out, but for some reason I just never listened to it. Yeah. So I agree. It's probably just more of an overlooked thing than it is a hated thing. Yeah.
Well, that's all we got for you today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. Make sure you drop us a comment down below. Let us know what some of your albums are that are really kind of overlooked or really hated, by the general music fans, but albums that you absolutely love. Because I definitely had more of this that I could have picked. But let us know what you guys think. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give us the old thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. And that's all we got. Until next time.
Talk to y'all later.
Keep on spinning. Peace.